Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We sift through stacks of information, research, literature,
hmm
and pull out the key insights for you. Today, we're getting into something that feels really big. The significance of learning English in schools.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And our main source material is a pretty comprehensive review. Scholarly articles, research reports, all trying to get at why English learning matters so much, and maybe even more importantly, how we can teach it effectively.
Finding what actually works.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. So when you mention English, the first thing that often comes up is universal language, right?
Right.
And our sources definitely back that up. It's described as the primary language in, well, a majority of nations worldwide. So it's obviously crucial to get a handle on it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's more than just being widespread.
Go on.
Well, the research highlights its official status that the UN aviation, it's the standard. But more than that, the point is that English is genuinely all around us. And that sort of shifts the perspective. It's not just handy to know. It's framed almost as a requirement, a
Yeah.
must for competing globally.
A baseline expectation almost.
Kind of. But here's the interesting twist, or paradox maybe.
Uh-huh.
That very fact, its omnipresence, can actually make it harder for learners psychologically.
That's a really strong point. And our sources definitely pick up on that.
Mm.
They mention how for many people, like in Indonesia, for example, learning English isn't just, difficult. It can be very challenging and at times even frightening.
Frightening,
Yeah.
yeah. It's the perceived complexity, the pressure.
A real anxiety, it sounds like, not just about getting the grammar right.
Exactly. And that personal anxiety, well, it scales up.
How so?
The research connects individual proficiency to national competitiveness. It suggests that good English proficiency fosters competitiveness, which is advantageous for our nation as well.
Right. Better performance in the workplace,
Right.
internationally.
Precisely. And importantly, this isn't about, forcing people to forget their own language or culture.
No, it's additive.
It's about adding a tool, equipping people, society, to perform better on that global stage. It's meant to enhance, not replace.
That makes sense. And it brings us neatly to the specific situation in Indonesia, which the sources delve into.
Yeah, it's a key case study.
So there, English is technically a foreign language, but it's still deeply embedded in society, right?
Basically, yeah.
Especially the education system from primary all the way up.
Very much so. But how it's taught has changed.
Oh,
How the curriculum has evolved. Back in 1994, the basic education curriculum actually mandated English right from primary school, SDMI, as they're known.
okay. So starting early.
Yeah. But then the 2013 curriculum shifted things. English wasn't a core subject anymore.
Okay.
Schools could still offer it, but more as an extracurricular thing, which, raises questions about policy and balancing priorities versus what happens on the ground.
Sure. And despite it being taught, whether core or extra, the sources flag a pretty critical issue.
Which is?
A very low percentage of people using English accurately and properly in Indonesia.
Right, that proficiency gap.
Yeah. And here's a viewpoint the research brings up, and we're just presenting this neutrally, as it
Yeah.
appeared in the source material,
Okay.
that sometimes the use of non-native languages in daily life can be seen by some as showing a lack of nationalism.
Wow, okay. That's a heavy perspective.
It is. It's certainly a challenging idea to navigate.
And it really feeds into that distinction the sources draw between English as a foreign language versus a second language in the Indonesian context.
Explain that difference.
Sure. So Tollinson, who's cited in our source, defines a foreign language essentially as something used mainly as a learning tool within institutions, schools, universities, formal or informal.
Right.
It's not typically used for everyday social chat, day-to-day life. So its study often stays in the realm of, theory and science.
Okay, so it's learned about more than lived in.
That's a good way to put it. Unlike a second language, which would be much more integrated into daily interactions.
So given that context, English mostly in the classroom, how does Indonesia stack up internationally in actual proficiency?
Well, the sources point to the EF English Proficiency Index, the EF-EPI. It's the first major index comparing adult English levels across different countries.
And what did it show for Indonesia?
The results were pretty stark, actually. Indonesia ranked 34th out of the 44 nations included in that specific index.
34th out of 44. It's quite low.
It is, especially when you contrast it with a neighbor like Malaysia, which ranked 9th.
Wow, big difference.
Huge. And the sources immediately link this to issues of educational equity,
Yeah.
meaning there are significant advantages for urban schools compared to those in more remote areas. Better facilities, more resources, better access to, quality English courses, maybe even native speaker teachers.
So it's not just about individual effort, it's structural. Access is key.
Access is a massive factor, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so faced with these challenges, but knowing English is important, how are educators trying to teach it better? The sources kept mentioning communicative language teaching, CLT.
Yes, CLT comes up a lot. It's a very widely used approach.
What's the core idea behind it?
The fundamental principle, and this is really why it's highlighted, is that CLT teaches language through actual communication.
Yeah.
Communication isn't just the end goal, it's the method, the vehicle for learning. The sources stress its efficiency, saying it helps students genuinely improve their communication abilities. It makes it active.
So less focus on just like drilling grammar rules in isolation.
Exactly. It's not just memorizing vocabulary or verb tables. CLT aims to get students to see English as a useful instrument for efficient conversation.
Makes sense.
The emphasis is on improving those practical communication skills, interpersonal skills, through interaction.
Interaction between students and teachers.
Yes, and crucially, among the students themselves, too. At its core, CLT fundamentally seeks to have pupils learn a new language by having them to interact with others in that language.
Right, learning by doing, essentially.
Pretty much. And it's got a strong reputation. The sources even call it potentially the most successful method for learning other languages.
High praise. Why so successful?
Largely because it mimics, in a way, how we learn our first language through trying to communicate, making mistakes, getting feedback, trying again.
That sounds very intuitive. So, beyond CLT specifically, if you were to generalize, what are the common features of foreign language teaching in schools? What would you typically see?
Well, the sources lay out about 9 key traits you'd commonly find. First, there's always a structured curriculum. It's designed to hit all 4 skills: speaking, listening, reading, and writing.
The basics.
Right. Second, a strong emphasis on grammar and vocabulary. But not just lists, understanding how words are built, conjugation, how to use words in the right context. Third, you'd see lots of speaking and listening drills. Classroom activities designed to give students chances for oral practice, listening to the teacher, listening to peers.
Active practice.
Definitely. Fourth, reading and writing exercises are standard. Learning to read different kinds of texts and building writing skills from sentences up to paragraphs, maybe essays.
Makes sense. What else?
Fifth, teachers use a whole range of tools and resources. Textbooks, naturally, but also workbooks, audio, video, games, maybe software, internet resources.
A mix of material.
Yeah. And sixth, tied to that, is the increasing use of technology. Computers, tablets, special language learning software, these can offer, instant feedback, keep students engaged, allow for practice on their own time.
Tech integration. What about the students themselves?
Good point. Seventh is promoting active student participation. Opportunities to speak with teachers, with peers, maybe role-playing activities, group discussions.
Getting them involved.
Exactly. Eighth is regular evaluation and feedback. Assignments, quizzes, structured exercises letting students know how they're doing, and giving constructive feedback to help them improve.
Checking progress.
And finally, the 9th trait is often incorporating cultural sensitivity. Learning about the traditions and customs associated with the language being studied.
So it's language and culture.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
It provides context. It's about understanding the world the language comes from. These elements together try to create a whole learning experience.
That paints a really clear picture of the typical setup. Now let's pivot slightly to revitalizing English education. The sources stress this needs more than just good teaching methods.
Right. It's also psychological.
Exactly. It's about fostering a real desire to learn and tackling head-on those feelings of anxiety, nervousness, and fear of being wrong that we talked about earlier.
Those are major roadblocks for a lot of learners.
For sure. So what strategies does the research suggest? How do you start to overcome those hurdles?
The sources offer several crucial starting points, 7 main ones, really.
Okay, lay them out for us.
First, it sounds basic, but meticulous lesson planning. Having clear objectives, the right resources, effective teaching strategies, and importantly, clear ways to evaluate and give feedback.
Organization is key.
Absolutely. Second, creating a genuinely supportive climate within the school, encouraging English use, maybe putting up English materials, getting students involved in things like language clubs or English performance shows.
Making it visible and normal.
Exactly. Third, using interactive teaching techniques. This really helps with engagement and reducing anxiety. Things like project-based learning, language games, role plays, group discussions.
Making it fun and engaging.
Yes. Fourth, applying technology effectively, which often enables those interactive methods we just mentioned.
Right. Tech is a tool.
Fifth, making sure students get enough time for active practice in all four skills: speaking, reading, writing, listening, maybe through role-playing real situations or recreating events.
Practice, practice, practice.
You got it. Sixth, providing feedback that's actually constructive and beneficial. Not just marking things wrong, but explaining errors. Evaluating assignments in a way that helps students see strengths and weaknesses.
Helpful feedback.
And seventh, and this might be one of the most important for bridging that foreign language divide,
Yeah.
encouraging the use of English outside the classroom, in everyday life. Reading English news, watching movies or TV shows in English, maybe finding opportunities to chat with native speakers if possible.
Bringing it into the real world.
Exactly, making it relevant beyond the school walls.
You know, it really does seem to loop back to that core idea of CLT, the communicative language teaching.
It does, doesn't it?
The sources consistently emphasize its effectiveness because it puts communication skills first, even above just accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It makes the learning feel relevant to actual life.
Right. It connects the why with the how.
So what does this all mean for you listening?
Well, it's about seeing language learning not just as a school subject, but as a way to connect. Understanding that it's possible to move past that initial fear and anxiety and build confidence. And that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive on learning English in schools. We've covered quite a bit: its global role, the specific challenges like in Indonesia, the CLT approach, general teaching traits, and strategies for revitalization.
It's been a lot to unpack.
Definitely.
So as you think about all this, here's something provocative to consider, a final thought for you. If English is often taught as a foreign language, in many places focusing on theory, mainly within institutions, yet it's also seen as absolutely vital for global competitiveness, well, how can education systems genuinely bridge that gap? How do we transform it from classroom theory into a living, actively used language? How do we really help learners overcome that anxiety, nervousness, and fear of being wrong, building not just knowledge, but that genuine desire and the confidence to communicate out there in the real world?
Big question. Definitely something to mull over. Until our next deep dive.